Abraham Lincoln's dealings with women was not limited strictly to romantic endeavors. As commander in chief, he had to deal with a number of different issues in which women were corresponding with him. And by taking a look at a number of the correspondences, we can try to learn a little bit more about who Lincoln was and what his personality was. In this document set, we're going to take a look at 4 different documents connected to Abraham Lincoln's actions as commander in chief. One could argue they don't have a whole lot in common, but what they do have in common is the fact that in all of them, Lincoln is dealing with an issue that has something to do with women's wishes or what a particular woman requests or wants. So by looking at these, the student of history needs to ask, are there similarities, are there parallels? And we need to ask ourselves as commander-in-chief, how did Lincoln deal with issues regarding women or requests that women made or issues that women brought up? And do these documents teach us anything about his personality? In what ways was he a bold leader or bold person? And perhaps in other ways, how was he not? Our first document is a brief document, Document A. It's a memorandum written at the White House regarding the appointment of a man named Gabriel R. Paul, or rather the promotion of Gabriel R. Paul. In the memorandum, Lincoln writes, "Today, Mrs. Major Paul of the Regular Army calls and urges the appointment of her husband as a brigadier general. She is a saucy woman, and I am afraid she will keep tormenting till I may have to do it." Here we have to ask ourselves, if Lincoln is willing to consider appointing a major to a brigadier general because a wife is pestering him, then what kind of commander-in-chief is he? Is he willing to be swayed by these types of requests? Is he willing to succumb to this sort of badgering? Or is he simply joking here? That's really up to the reader to decide. This could simply be a joke. Perhaps he was going to consider doing it anyway. He ended up appointing Gabriel Paul to the rank of brigadier general. Gabriel Paul ends up getting seriously wounded at the Battle of Gettysburg. Whether or not he made this appointment because of the involvement of his wife, we don't have any proof of, but certainly this document sheds some light on to what Lincoln was thinking. Our next document, Document B, is Lincoln once again responding to the request of a woman. This time the situation is much different. There's a woman who is requesting to have her son released from Old Capitol Prison, which was a prison in Washington, D.C. during the Civil War. This is a short, simple document. One could brush it aside and say it's not historically significant, probably could make a legitimate argument for that. Or one could ask if it fits into a larger pattern about Lincoln and dealing with requests from women. We don't have a lot of context here about who she was and what her son had done. But what we do have is Lincoln endorsing a request and releasing a prisoner from Old Capitol Prison in Washington. Our next document, Document C, has some similarities with the previous document in the sense that it is once again a woman making a request to Abraham Lincoln regarding her son. Lincoln writes in this note to Edwin Stanton, "This woman says her husband and 2 sons are in the war, that the youngest son, W.J. Klaproth, is a private in Company D of 143rd Pennsylvania Volunteers, was wounded, made a prisoner and paroled at Gettysburg, and is now at Center Street Hospital, New Jersey, and that he was under 18 when he entered the service without the consent of his father or herself. She says she is destitute, and she asks that he may be discharged. If she makes satisfactory proof of the above, let it be done." So once again, we see Abraham Lincoln supporting the request of a woman when it comes to a military matter. In the previous letter, you had a woman requesting that her son be released from prison. In this case, this woman is requesting that her son be released from his military duties. In both cases, it appears that Lincoln is willing to acquiesce. And of course, in the first letter, Lincoln was willing to acquiesce when a wife of a major requested that her husband get a promotion. So it seems that there's a pattern here. Once again, though, it's up to you to determine if these are isolated incidences or if they are showing that Lincoln has certain characteristics and traits in his behavior. Our final document in this set is quite different from the others. It also deals with the issue of a woman and her requests of the president, but this time it is a family matter in the sense that the woman is Mary Todd Lincoln's sister, Emily, and Lincoln is writing here referring to certain privileges she had been given in the past. Emily was married to a man named Hardin Helm, and when the Civil War broke out, Helm, who was from Kentucky, decided to become a Confederate general rather than be loyal to the Union. This, of course, put his wife in an extremely difficult position, being married to a Confederate general, but sister to the First Lady of the United States and wife of Abraham Lincoln. Emily Todd Helm had spent some time at the White House during the Civil War, and there was some questions in public circles about whether or not she was loyal to the Union and whether she should be allowed to travel freely throughout the North, seeing as she had been married to or was married to a Confederate general. And so Lincoln ended up writing a letter to Stephen Burbridge in which he dealt with this particular matter. Stephen Burbridge was a major general for the Union Army in Kentucky, and Lincoln wrote to him saying, "Last December, Mrs. Emily T. Helm, half-sister of Mrs. L., meaning Lincoln, and widow of the rebel General Benjamin Hardin Helm, stopped here on her way from Georgia to Kentucky, and I gave her a paper, as I remember, to protect her against the mere fact of her being General Helm's widow. I hear a rumor today that you recently sought to arrest her, but was prevented by her presenting the paper from me. I do not intend to protect her against the consequences of disloyal words or acts, spoken or done by her since her return to Kentucky, and if the paper given her by me can be construed to give her protection for such words or acts, it is hereby revoked pro tanto. Deal with her for current conduct, just as you would. In this case, we see a different Lincoln, a Lincoln who's once again dealing with a situation regarding military matters and matters of loyalty, and a woman. In this case, though, the difference is this woman is connected to his family, his reputation is at stake, and it would appear he acts somewhat differently because of that. The four documents presented here are of distinctly different nature, but they all have one thing in common, in that they are dealing with Lincoln and his behavior surrounding women and their communications or their interactions with him during the Civil War. Whether these documents show us something about Lincoln's personality, about who he was as a commander-in-chief, as a leader, as a person, is up to the student of history to decide. But ultimately, each one of these individually do shed some light on how Lincoln dealt with specific situations.